Family dynamics have always been complicated in our household. But I never thought it would come to this. Growing up, my sister and I were close. At least on the surface. We played together, shared secrets, and attended the same schools. But even then, there was always an undercurrent of competition, of jealousy simmering just beneath the surface. We were different in almost every way. She was outgoing, bold, and never afraid to speak her mind, while I was quieter, more reserved, the peacemaker in the family. We had our differences, but I never imagined those differences would spill over into our adult lives in such a destructive way. It all came to a head one summer afternoon at a family barbecue. The day had started off like any other family gathering, filled with the usual chaos of kids running around, relatives chatting over drinks, and the smell of grilled burgers and hot dogs filling the air. My kids, Mason and Ella, were playing in the backyard with their cousins, laughing and chasing each other while the adults gathered on the porch, catching up on life. Everything seemed fine until I noticed a shift in the atmosphere. My kids had come back to the porch looking confused, their usually bright faces clouded with something I couldn't quite place. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming they had just gotten tired or had a small spat with their cousins, which happens all the time with kids. But the look in their eyes lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Later that afternoon, when we were all sitting down to eat, I overheard Ella asking Mason, in that innocent, curious way children do, "Why aren't we really part of the family?" My heart stopped for a moment, and I felt the air around me grow thick with tension. I glanced over at my sister, who was sitting a few seats away, and immediately, I knew. The way she looked away from me, her eyes darting down to her plate, told me everything I needed to know. My sister had said something to my kids, something cruel, something that had clearly confused and hurt them. And as soon as I realized that, the anger rose in me like a tidal wave. I kept my composure in front of everyone else, but inside, I was boiling. How could she say something like that to them? My kids were part of this family just as much as anyone else, and the idea that she would suggest otherwise enraged me. I waited until we got home that evening before bringing it up with the kids. As I tucked them into bed, I gently asked Ella what she had meant earlier when she asked about not being part of the family. Her answer broke my heart. "Auntie said we're not really family because we're adopted," she said quietly. Her big brown eyes filled with confusion. "She said we don't count the same way as the other cousins." In that moment, I felt my blood run cold. The betrayal I felt was overwhelming. I had worked so hard to make sure my kids never felt different, never felt like they didn't belong. Mason and Ella were adopted, yes, but that never made them any less my children or any less a part of our family. I had always believed that love, not biology, is what makes a family, and I had raised my kids to believe the same. But now, my sister had planted this seed of doubt in their minds, and I couldn't stand it. I had to say something. I had to confront her. The next day, I called my sister. I didn't want to do it in front of the kids, and I didn't want to wait until the next family gathering to address it. I was still fuming, but I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained what Ella had told me. I expected her to apologize, to show some sort of remorse for what she had said. But instead, she doubled down. "They are not really related to us by blood," she said. "I didn't mean it to be hurtful, but it's just the truth. I don't see why you're so upset." Her words felt like a slap in the face. How could she be so dismissive? So callous? I tried to explain how much her words had hurt my kids, how much they had hurt me. But she just brushed it off, insisting that I was overreacting. She said I was too sensitive, that my kids needed to learn the truth about where they came from and that I couldn't shield them from reality forever. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The idea that she thought of my children as anything less than her nieces and nephews made me sick. They had been a part of our family since the day they were born. Mason at 3 days old, and Ella at just 5 months. They had grown up with their cousins, shared holidays, birthdays, and countless family memories. They were my children in every way that mattered. And the fact that my sister couldn't see that, No, refused to see that. Left me feeling gutted. I lost it. I scolded her, telling her that what she said was cruel, unnecessary, and completely out of line. I told her that she had no right to make my kids feel like outsiders in their own family, and that if she couldn't see them as family, then maybe she didn't deserve to be a part of their lives. The words spilled out of me, fueled by years of pent-up frustration and hurt that I hadn't even realized I had been carrying. She didn't take it well. She accused me of being too emotional, too protective. She said I was overreacting and that I was blowing everything out of proportion. She even went as far as to say that I was being selfish, that I was putting my own feelings ahead of my kids' need to understand the truth. The conversation ended with both of us angry, and neither of us willing to back down. I hung up the phone, shaking with rage, but also filled with doubt. Had I overreacted? Was I wrong for scolding her the way I did? Should I have handled it differently? The days that followed were filled with silence between us. My sister and I didn't speak, and I could feel the rift between us growing wider with each passing day. Family events became tense, awkward affairs, with both of us avoiding each other as much as possible. I could tell the rest of the family sensed the tension, but no one wanted to get involved. They stayed on the sidelines, not wanting to pick sides in what had become a deeply personal and painful conflict. Meanwhile, I did my best to reassure my kids. I reminded them every day that they were loved, that they were just as much a part of this family as anyone else, and that nothing anyone said could ever change that. But the damage had been done. I could see the doubt lingering in their eyes, the uncertainty that hadn't been there before. My sister's words had left a mark, and no matter how hard I tried to erase it, I couldn't undo what she had said. I questioned myself constantly. Was I wrong for the way I had handled it? Should I have approached the situation with more patience, more understanding? Maybe I should have tried to educate her, to explain why her words were so hurtful instead of lashing out in anger. Maybe I should have given her the benefit of the doubt, assuming she didn't mean any harm, even though her words had cut deep. But every time I thought about letting it go, about forgiving her and moving on, I remembered the look on my kids' faces when they asked me if they weren't really part of the family. I remembered the confusion, the hurt, and the fear that they didn't belong. And my resolve would harden again. I couldn't let this slide. I couldn't allow anyone, not even my own sister, to make my kids feel like they didn't matter. Weeks turned into months, and the silence between my sister and me continued. We both became entrenched in our positions, unwilling to budge. The rest of the family tried to maintain the peace, but the strain was clear. Holidays and birthdays were no longer the joyous occasions they had once been. There was an unspoken tension that hung over every gathering, and I knew it was because of the unresolved conflict between us. Part of me wanted to fix things, to mend the rift and bring our family back together. But another part of me, the part that was still angry, still hurt, couldn't let go of what she had said. How could I ever trust her again? How could I let her be a part of my kids' lives when I knew she didn't see them as family? As time went on, I started to realize that this wasn't just about my sister's words. It was about something deeper. It was about the fear that I had always carried with me. The fear that one day, my kids would feel different, that they would feel like they didn't belong. And my sister's words had brought that fear to the surface in a way I hadn't expected. But even as I wrestled with my own emotions, I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't wrong for defending my kids. I wasn't wrong for standing up for them and making it clear that they were, and always would be, part of this family. If anything, I had learned that sometimes protecting the people you love means setting boundaries, even with the ones you care about. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't without pain, but it was necessary. In the end, I don't know if my sister and I will ever fully repair the damage that was done. But I do know that I'll always choose my kids. Always. And in a world where family can sometimes be the source of the deepest wounds,